It's been several weeks now since the Emergencies Act was lifted, but I and perhaps many Canadians still can't get over the shock and, can I say, horror that we were even in a situation where something like that was implemented. Unpack this for me. How did we get to that point?
Right. Well, this moment showed the ugly face of Canadian political life, I think, and also perhaps represents the moment of the end of the Canadian consensus on COVID and on other larger things. I mean, Canada is an obedient country, and it looked like for a long time, like most of the country was on the same page with respect to COVID restrictions and vaccine mandates and government direction of society. And in this moment, the truckers basically said, actually, no, we don't agree. And a lot of other people who I think were mostly silenced during this period discovered that they weren't alone in what they thought. And so one of the consequences of this, I think, and I hope, is that we now have polarization. We have polarization over some very important questions and ideas. And that's not a bad thing in a country that pretends to be free and pretends to be a democracy.
That's a very good point. Often we hear that American politics is so divisive, so polarizing. And one has to step back and say, well, is that actually a bad thing? I personally think that's great. Let there be debate, let there be discussion. That's how I think great policy is hammered out. When you have, all sides come together, debate the heck out of something, and then, good legislation hopefully will come forward without force, without coercion. And that's the sign of a healthy democracy. Debate is a good thing. It's okay to have different opinions. We don't have to be we don't have to have consensus on everything all the time.
Exactly so. Exactly so. The idea of civilized society, I think, is not to avoid conflict, but to avoid violence. If you can have conflict without violence, if you have a dialogue and try to work out your problems on big questions, then that's the objective. But as you say, it's also healthy to have opinions that are on either ends of a wide spectrum, because that's the nature of the polity, right? And it is not necessary to agree with people that you vehemently disagree with, because that's false. And in this country, we've been missing that, I think, for this period. It's great that people found the truckers, saw what they were doing, came to protest, danced in the streets, and even those that didn't come saw what was going on, cheered them, at highway overpasses, and found out that we are, in fact, a split country. And as you say, I think that's a great thing.
So when I think of the long-term effects during this past 2 years with all these, with the COVID and everything, and I'm not talking about long COVID, I'm talking about societal relations, social relations. In my opinion, one devastation has been the breakdown within family relationships, where one would be pitted pro or against the COVID jab, that sort of thing. But you do bring up a very good point in that, well, one of the positives, and I never think about it, I'm a doom and gloom thinker, so I appreciate the sunny ways from Bruce Pardy. But one positive is that, people have found their voice, and they could stand up on an issue that they felt was important, and that we can have this dialogue and things can change.
Yes. So one of the unfortunate characteristics that we carry around is that we're so agreeable. We're supposed to agree. We don't like conflict as a country. And that's not a healthy place to be. Giving these people a voice and legitimacy and expressing that voice to people who are close to them, to family members and friends, is very, very important. And perhaps now we can have an open debate, because up until now, we've been subject to, claims of, misinformation and being extreme. After all, the prime minister called the truckers a fringe minority with unacceptable views, and that's exactly the opposite to what we want.